to never say never, even though we have to be realistic. We did actually get the House to make a vote on VAWA with LGBT inclusive language. So the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization included sexual orientation and gender identity language. That was a good vote. We got, I think we should just be ready for any opportunity to slip something in. I'll just put it out there. You never know. We could never have imagined just some of the progress that we've had, even in Congress, even in a sort of, get not much done Congress. You mentioned the comprehensive bill. That's certainly, at the top of the list. We also have been trying to do some work around the Homeless and Runaway Youth Act, which is really important to our community. We also are continuing to try to get non-discrimination legislation for students through, as well as, on the progressive side of issues. We do need to be more vocal and adamant about restoring voting rights. We do need to stand with folks on the issue of immigrant rights, and we do need to support the End Racial Profiling Act, because that's also a very important issue that has got the nation's attention and could use a boost from the LGBT community in terms of the support. Not just the support, but also we're directly impacted by all of the issues I just mentioned as well.
I sort of push back on the notion that we should assume that just because Congress remains in Republican hands, we should give up on trying to pass something on the discrimination front. If we use that logic, we wouldn't be trying very hard in the Pennsylvania legislature, because they have overwhelming Republican majorities in both chambers, and yet with Brian's work and with some Republican lawmakers' leadership, we have a real fighting chance of passing that in this legislative session. And I think the national groups have to adapt to the political climate we live in today. So if we think that the House of Representatives is going to be in Republican hands for the next decade, then the HRC and other groups need to adapt to that climate. They need to hire some Republican lobbyists and Republican staff and figure out how are we going to convince, maybe we get a Democratic Senate and a Republican House. Maybe we pass a non-discrimination bill through the Senate, and then they use that to negotiate with the House to pass something in return. I don't think we should assume that that it's impossible and just give up for the next 10 or 20 years. We may not get a comprehensive civil rights bill, but we may be able to get something that is less ambitious through this Congress. And I don't think we should wait 20 years to try to pass something like this. You look at the biggest funders of the Republican Party today now. A great number of those folks that are financing the U.S. Senate campaigns and the presidential campaigns and the Republican National Committee now support the freedom to marry, and they certainly support non-discrimination measures. Don't think that Republican lawmakers don't listen to people that have that kind of money and that finance their campaigns. I think John Boehner and McConnell, they certainly aren't supportive of these measures, but they also are a lot more pragmatic than a lot of the rank and file members. So I would argue that we ought to, as a movement, think about a strategy to pass something more modest in the short term, and then continue to work for a more comprehensive fix longer term.
In Boehner's defense, he did have a meeting with the LGBT caucus, so that's something. It was secret.
Well, I'm not defending John Boehner. I'm just saying we shouldn't give up.
Okay. And does anyone want to say anything else before we open it up to questions about sort of the future of the movement and what else we should, I know we touched on that a little bit in the last panel, Brad got into that, but anything you want to say about that?
Well, I haven't mentioned yet that there are obviously countless conversations happening in living rooms across the nation about Caitlyn Jenner and about the transgender community, and that we should seize this opportunity while people are understanding transgender and gender nonconforming people vis-a-vis Caitlyn Jenner or Laverne Cox or any other public figure. I think that it's a perfect opportunity for us to make some asks around addressing the violence that happens, the unanswered and unsolved crimes against victims of transphobia and the discrimination that's encountered in terms of employment and housing and the absence of dignity in public restrooms, just a whole host of ways in which we can do some work in that regard. So I didn't want to not use this opportunity to lift that up and raise that up. I think it's not often that you get a president to say the word transgender in a State of the Union address, and it's not often that you get award-winning Emmys with transparent and orange is the new black. So we should take advantage of that.
Yeah, last year's Equality Forum, the featured nation was Canada, and the reason they were selected was because it was the 10th anniversary of marriage equality in their country. And so we had the folks who helped to make that happen. And the big takeaway from all of that was that they had not prepared themselves for their own victory, which is, the perception was they had gotten marriage equality, and the community's perception was game over. And they really had not strategically thought about what else needed to be done, how to prepare the community for the road ahead. So, marriage equality is clearly a remarkable moment, but it's the halfway point. I mean, the goal, obviously, is the eradication of external and internal homophobia. That is the goal. And so, I mean, just for me personally, and certainly Equality Forum, we are the only minority community in the world that's not taught its history at home, public school, or religious institution. That has a profound impact on fueling this movement. I mean, our younger people have got to know that history, and they also need to have the narratives. And we have so many narratives. I mean, we've got more narratives. I mean, Bishop Gene Robinson. I mean, in terms of, all of these people who were the first, and and right now we're not spending a nickel on our own history, and we need to be doing that if we want to put our movement in perspective and give people the level of commitment, because they understand our narratives, they understand our history, and they understand what the trajectory is.
Well said. All right, what are your questions? Front row.
Other than passing in state legislature to state legislature, are there other priorities that you think cohesively need to that work across state legislatures to focus on for our agenda? And secondly, have you heard of other states other than Maryland, where I'm from, where I heard that there are individuals in the LGBT community that have disengaged, activists or funders that have disengaged somewhat since the passage of marriage equality? Have you heard that in other states as well?
Well, there are. So we have non-discrimination measures that need to be passed in the entire South, a good portion of the Mountain West, and a fair number of Midwestern states, and I'll include Pennsylvania in that since it's the last Middle Atlantic state not to do so. And then we have fixes on transgender inclusion in places like Massachusetts, New York, Wisconsin. And then there are family law issues. I adopted 2 kids in Florida, started the process while we still had a ban in place in Florida for a ban excluding gay people from adopting children. There are a lot of laws similar to that across the South that need to be fixed so that now that folks can get married, they can actually start a family like they'd like to. We've got schools issues. We've got youth, especially in the South, but not exclusively, that continue to face, disgusting and ruthless bullying in the schools. So we have safe schools legislation that needs to be passed or strengthened in many states. So, and then there's healthcare. I mean, we can go down the list of issues that we have yet to accomplish way beyond marriage. As far as funding goes and disengagement among the activist community, I think it's still a little early, but I will say that, when I go to places like New York and some of the coastal cities where they've had marriage for a number of years now, there are donors that have closed their checkbooks when it comes to the LGBT community. They've moved on to other things, the arts or the environment or international LGBT work outside of this country, even though we have so much to do here in this nation. So there are folks that, yes, have decided that they've got what they need, and they're not really so concerned about folks in Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida, and Pennsylvania. So that's a really frightening prospect for me, and I think we need to make sure as activists to keep reminding folks where they came from, where their parents retired to, where they went to school, that things aren't as rosy in these places, especially in the South, as they are in Manhattan and in San Francisco.
And I wouldn't read too much into the Equality Maryland story. They've been a mess for a long time. I live in Maryland too, so I'm well aware. Okay, next, yeah, in the back.
I'm curious in this sort of immediate period of both celebration and reflection, whether any of you have begun drawing new lessons about either the strength or weakness or the needs for the sort of larger national LGBT political organization moving forward.
Well, I think it's what I said earlier, but I'll just repeat it quickly. I think we're too siloed. I think we think about LGBT issues and it's a very short list and it doesn't take into account the vast experience of LGBT lives. I mean, one thing about the LGBT community, and it's not just a slogan, we are literally everywhere. We are in every demographic, we're represented in every ethnic group, we're in every geography, we're along the entire economic spectrum. But I think it was important to think about marriage as an LGBT issue because we were the only couples, as same-sex couples, who couldn't marry. So there are some issues that fall disproportionately on LGBT people, but I think if we're going to be really effective, and if we're going to bridge a funding gap, if there is a fall-off, or if we're going to make a case, I feel like donors will give if you make a case that is compelling for why work still needs to be done here. And I think there's a way to do that, but I think it is going to be much of what everyone said. It's around a range of issues, whether it's gender identity and transgender issues and violence against transgender women, or whether it's conversion therapy, or whether it's immigration. We do need to think about LGBT people more than just, oh, it's just marriage or it's just a little box, because our experience is so much more vast. I feel like I've been traveling around the country, and I'm from California, NCLR is based in San Francisco. We've seen no fall off in support, and California has been obviously in the marriage column since the demise of Prop 8. And I think it's just a matter of making the case for the difference you can make. And imagine where you came from, or imagine what it was like growing up as a 12 or 13-year-old when you first realized you might be different. We want to make sure that that kid, no matter where they live, and if they are, particularly if they're poor or if they're of color, they see that they have a brighter future, and you're investing in their possibility of a brighter future. So I feel like I think we need to drop our walls and work in concert with a lot of other organizations, mainstream civil rights organizations, working on a lot of these issues to make that case effectively and show that we can bring it home for everybody.
I only have a comment. I think one of the biggest mistakes that our movement made was putting the movement in the back pocket of any particular political party. In this case, the Democratic Party. When I think of Obama, the delirium over him and his support for LGBT issues. I think of other issues that are also important to me, like mass surveillance, and a man who's earned the title of deportation president or drone president. You know, when we bubble over about, he's the best yet for LGBT rights. And we're talking to someone from another community, let's say an immigrant community, whose issues of immigration are really stabbing their heart. I don't think it goes very far in coalition building. I think it's really important not to get starry-eyed over any particular politician. A really excellent example of what Obama is capable of is when Genesette Gutierrez was essentially booed at the White House. She raised transgender issues and immigrant issues, and essentially got booed. So again, I think it's important not to get starry-eyed over any politician. It's the 21st century. We should have rights and not be surprised.
Are we starry-eyed? Are y'all starry-eyed? No. Okay.
I think we are.
All right.
I was wondering what your opinions are about organizations advocating more with the administration through the State Department, through John Kerry. I know Hillary did, some of that as far as influencing other countries in Africa and in the Arab world. They have these horrendous, anti-gay, things on it, in their policies. And is there anything you think the U.S. could even do more in terms of withdrawing aid or just making a contingent, on changing their attitudes?
Well, I mean, not to be too starry about the Obama administration, but this is really something that the current State Department is, for the first time, really started doing in a very, very significant way, where we've seen the President and the Secretary of State raise these issues in a number of different countries. I think you see groups like the Arcus Foundation, which is now shifting, one of the biggest funders in our movement, shifting a huge amount of their attention to work on the international stage. And we have to replicate some of the things that we did here domestically. We're going to have to work in faith communities around the globe. And we're going to have to work with cultural institutions and the business community, even the American and foreign business leaders in some of these places that are spending a lot of money building these economies to advocate on our behalf. So it's a question that we should be asking all of the candidates for president, outside of just where are you on marriage or religious liberties or non-discrimination issues. We should be asking them how they're going to use the tools they have at their disposal when it comes to foreign aid and many other carrots and sticks, how they're going to engage to improve the lives of LGBT folks around the globe.
One more, right here.
Politically, what do you guys think our community's defense is going to be in regards to the religious freedom opposition to gay marriage?
Well, I think it'll be a combination of public opinion and pressure, and it'll be lawsuits. I mean, undoubtedly there will be some of these laws that we will have to challenge, but I think, and look, I could be proven wrong, and if I'll see you a year from now, you can tell me whether I was wrong or right. I think this pushback is going to be short-lived, and I agree with what Kirk said earlier. I think we would have seen more of it before the ruling, because the time to sort of pass laws like this is before people start going to weddings, or their cousin comes out, or their sister comes out to them, and now they have to deal with it. And now many more people, I mean, I had in my inbox several wedding announcements from couples who I was absolutely convinced were just never going to get married because they didn't want to have anything to do with it. That decision sort of shifted. So I think we'll sue if we have to, and right now NCLR is very involved in Alabama, and we've been having to push back with Roy Moore and everybody there for a very long time. And Alabama may yet pass some terrible religious refusal law. So litigation groups will sue. But I think in the court of public opinion and just with electing better elected representatives as possible to do in some of these states, I think this is gonna be a whimper, not a cry.
How long do you think the whimper will be though?
I'm putting it on like a year to 18-month trajectory, really. I do not think we're looking at a 10-year battle here. And I think it will be isolated, and I think you could count the number of states who will pass the worst of these laws on one hand.
I have a very different opinion. I think it's going to be
Ooh, good, we'll arm wrestle.
I think it's going to be much more protracted. I think that it's going to be fairly ugly. I think that some of the same sentiments that were tied to what happened in Charleston are tied to the hatred and opposition to our rights in terms of what we want. I think that the writing on the wall with respect to what happened in the repro context is being mirrored in the LGBTQ context, and they are still fighting, which is why I think that greater alignment between our movements is in order so that we can actually win. So if we do win faster, and if it's a shorter battle, it'll be because we found a way to achieve common ground and fight together. But no, I don't think there's anything especially magical about marriage that makes people love you more and respect you more and interpret their religion differently. So that's what I think.
Maybe I'm in the middle. So I think it's I think these debates are going to be coupled with our affirmative efforts to pass non-discrimination measures on the state level. So as we have these debates, I think these are largely Republican states we're trying to pass these things in. So there is going to be an attempt to attach exemptions that vary in how wide they may be, that exempt various professions from having to do things against their firmly held religious beliefs. And I think that's where that debate's going to continue for probably a longer period of time. And that it may be somewhat ugly. If we want to pass a non-discrimination bill in a state and they insist on amending it with a pretty gaping exemption that allows people to discriminate for a wide host of reasons, then that's going to be tough for our community. We're going to have some knockdown, drag-out battles internally as well, because I think there are going to be some folks in the community that are going to be pushing for passage of things that include exemptions that many of us would not accept.
Yeah, I thought, well, I was obviously remarkably pleased today in terms of the Episcopal Church, in terms of them being willing to marry same-sex couples. And so it's no longer religion versus debauchery. It's really literally the freedom of religion to make their own determination as to what their values are. And what we're seeing is a remarkable cultural shift across the religious spectrum, in different ways, but across the religious spectrum, including the current Pope. Okay, who am I to judge? And I think that's a cause for remarkable celebration of a change that's happening in our culture that I think is going to inure to the benefit of this community.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming. Let's hear it for the panel.